So here we are. It's another second Tuesday of the month, and I want to thank Bart for having this wonderful venue for us to hold our history pub. Thank you, Bart. And the history pubs are sponsored by Downtown Cottage Grove and the Cottage Grove Genealogical Society. And I'm very thankful for this opportunity to bring history to Cottage Grove. Some we've never heard about, and some we've learned more to the story. I also want to thank Jim Lockhart, our videographer, for capturing these events. And then they go up on the Cottage Grove Genealogical Society's YouTube channel, and it's CG Genealogy at YouTube. In the Cottage Grove, we have several partners in history. We're a loose group of the historical organizations, and we gather once a year to try to find ways to collaborate and help each other. And those organizations are the Cottage Grove Historical Museum, the Cottage Grove Genealogical Society, the Cottage Grove Historical Society, the Cottage Grove Library, the Bohemian Mining Museum, Singing Creek, and Oregon Aviation Historical Society. And we have other partners in Lane County, the Lane County History Museum, the Springfield Museum, and we have many other partners that are working behind the scenes to make sure that we're all viable and active organizations. And I appreciate everyone's effort to bring history to the public. So tonight, Dana is going to present a topic that's not talked about much. Before I start with that, though, I want to thank PC Garage. We weren't sure we were going to have our projector, and I ran next door. They loaned me a monitor, and then we didn't need it, so I took it back. So even in emergency, PC Garage was willing to just let me walk out of there with a monitor. I thought that was pretty cool. So Dana was born in Madison, Florida, and has Confederates on his father's side and Klan on his mother's branch. By another lucky happenstance, Merryday was fortunate enough to have at every juncture in school, he landed in a history class taught by energetic and skilled teachers who instilled a lifelong love of living in the past. And I'm there with you, Dana. Having chosen to purposely move to Cottage Grove, the Merrydays bought a Wynn's Edition 1910 home and still have a lot of fixing up to do. Maybe he should be recalled so his wife can get the kitchen of her dreams, or at least get rid of the despised particle board shelves. Doing research as part of the Swinging Bridge restoration effort, Merryday stumbled across a notice in the Cottage Grove ladies' KKK function and discovered he hadn't left his deep South roots far behind at all. Dissatisfied with the local political climate, he launched a grassroots campaign accepting no money and using homemade signs, and was elected as city councilor for Ward 3, which he is very proud to represent. Yay, Dana. In the same spirit, he's offering a choice in this year's mayoral contest. In addition, Merryday serves on the Cottage Grove Museum Board, the Mural Committee, and is an active member of Cottage Grove Historical Society and Cottage Grove Genealogical Society. So Dana.
Thank you all for coming out. I know a lot of people are itching to wonder what's going on with the debate tonight, so I appreciate you coming out to see what we got in our past. So I want to start by sharing this message. This is on the Oregon Public Broadcasting's Oregon Klan in the 20s documentary. That's a quick study on the Klan in Oregon in the 20s. But the Oregon experience tells stories about the people, places, and events that have shaped our state. Sometimes the stories make us feel uncomfortable. Now, nonetheless, we believe it is important to explore and our history in full. So with that in mind, I know it's a sensitive topic because when you say KKK, it means a lot of things to a lot of people. And I know I grew up in the southern states when it wasn't possible for a person of African descent to walk into certain businesses. They could not enter a restaurant. They could work in the kitchen, but you couldn't go down and sit and have a meal. If you went across the color line, there was some real things in place, and the Klan was there in my time to protest desegregation because they said that's not right, it's not natural. In our state capitol, when we went from an all-white segregated school on the school bus for a tour of the Capitol, when you went into the legislature wings, if you looked up on the wall, they had mounted all around the in the Senate chambers and in the House chambers, Confederate battle flags from different Florida regiments. And as a kid, I was very proud because my great-great-grandfather had fought in the war, and I grew up hearing all the glory of the lost cause. You know, oh, if Stonewall Jackson hadn't been killed by his own men, the South would have won the war. But back to those great history teachers I had. Even though they were teaching in public school, they said, facts are facts. It was a war of attrition. The North had all the industry. The naval blockade was extremely successful. The South never really had a chance. And so, you know, I listened to my grandmother and I humored her, and she was a daughter of the Confederacy. If one of the slides you would have seen would have been a certificate from the United Daughters of the Confederacy for my great aunt, and Toto. Her father was the veteran that was in the Florida War. He ran away at age 16 to join, lied about his age, and came back pretty crippled up with rheumatism from the poor working conditions. So back to the mom's side, my whole life I would go down to the farm. We lived 7 hours away. They were in Arcadia. They were Georgia people that had wandered down the state to the Panhandle, and I never knew anything about their Klan association. It wasn't something people talked about. It was a secret organization, so you didn't go around and say, hey, guess what, I'm in that special society, unless you were also a member. And so I didn't know really that my grandparents, they were born, my granddad was born in the 1800s, the very tail end of the 1800s, and my grandmother right at the turn of the century. So they were in perfect alignment for the what I call or what is called is the second Klan. So I was down there one time with all my cousins, and somehow it came up in the talk. I go, you know that Big Mama and Big Daddy were in the Klan, didn't you? And I'm like, no. And they go, well, you remember that little chest at the foot of his bed? And I go, yeah. He goes, well, that's where the robes are. And I go, oh. Well, anyway, so and I asked my grandmother, and she confirmed it. And she said, yeah, well, yeah, of course. And it was our first date. We went to a meeting. And it was a social, fraternal organization in many ways in that incarnation. And she told me, it's not like you think. It's not racial. It's like if somebody was mistreating their wife, well, they got a visit. And I know my grandparents. They were very devout Christians, church-going people, moral people. And the second Klan had that attribute. I know it's hard to think. So I'm just going to read. This is not the actual article that got me started on this, but I was looking at microfilm, and I lost my notes, so I don't know exactly what date it was. It was sometime in the 30s. But this is close enough. Cottage Grove, women of the Ku Klux Klan hold a district meeting Saturday. And this was from 1930. The women of the Ku Klux Klan will hold their district meeting Saturday, April 10th in the Independent Order of Oddfellows Hall. The meeting will start at 1:30 p.m. with a closed meeting. A large class will be initiated into the Klan. At 6:30, potluck dinner will be served. The meeting will be an open one with several speakers on the program. The imperial representatives from both Oregon and Washington will be present. So there was a very fraternal, the fact that they were meeting in the Oddfellows Hall shows that they were also considered to be a fraternal organization. Here's a brief history.
What year was that?
That was in 1930. So it's kind of the tail end of the Klan in Oregon. There's 3 separate history periods of Ku Klux Klan, and none of them had any connection to the others, other than maybe some old members drifted into the new organization. The first Klan existed during Reconstruction, and that was roughly from 1865 to 1872, and mostly composed of former Confederate officers, Confederate veterans, and it was a reaction to Reconstruction and also to federal policy. The second Klan, and that's the one that got to Oregon and the one I'm going to spend most of my time talking about, they started in 1915 and it kind of petered out towards the mid-40s. And this was a nationwide movement. It was the most popular. They estimate it's between 3 and 6 million, and it was not limited to the South. It was spread all over. It got to Washington, Northern California, Oregon, Colorado, Indiana, Midwestern states, all around. And it was the glory days. So the pictures you see of mass movements of white robes down the nation capital streets, for example, that is the second Klan. And then the third Klan is formed as a reaction to the court decisions and the beginning of the civil rights movement. They were the pushback on that. So the third Klan, it was very small, but very violent. And none of these really had connections to each other. There are 3 separate periods in our history. I made a Venn diagram, and I made the three things. Now there are some unifying factors here. So the Klan has always been a bit reactionary. That means they react to social change. They have always endorsed white supremacy or white nationalism. And they generally tend to be populists. They are attracted to the popular beliefs and connecting to the people. And they've all been pretty much anti-immigration. There wasn't much immigration happening during Reconstruction, but movement of people, any type of movement of people, they've been down on. So a couple of connections. So Klans 1, the Reconstruction Klan and the reaction to desegregation were both small and basically violent organizations. They used terror. They would assassinate people. In the Reconstruction times, they would show up and kill people either through lynching or shooting. They attacked federal troops. They attempted to fight back against enfranchisement of African Americans. They also reacted to the when when Reconstruction happened, it was often that blacks were elected to legislatures and stuff, and they often arranged to have them eliminated. So in the 60s, as you well know, the Klan was responsible for the church bombing in Birmingham and the civil rights murders in Mississippi that caught the national headlines. So in that way, the first Klan and the third Klan had a connection. They tended to be very reactionary about changing social conditions. The first and the second Klan, they shared a vision of the lost cause, that what happened in the Civil War was never rectified and needed to be sorted out. And also, they were very mores based. So when society changed, they were not happy with the way things were going, so they wanted to imprint that. Between the second and the third Klan, about the only connection they had was they wanted to support pure Americanism. So the immigration wasn't a big issue for the first Klan, it was more Reconstruction. But the second and third Klans were really, we have to save America for Americans, the pure Americanism, 100% Americanism. So that's what they shared in common. What made them different, as I have stated, the second Klan, which is the one I'm going to be talking about, they had a moral mission. They attracted church people. They often spoke at churches. The founder of the second Klan was, and in fact, Simmons was a minister. And so they had this, they were pro-prohibition. They wanted alcohol out of our society. They wanted to have God-fearing citizens, pure, morals. They were against bootleggers and ne'er-do-wells and anything of that sort. Interestingly enough, the second Klan is where the burning crosses came from, and we'll get to that in a minute. But the first Klan did not use burning crosses, nor did they use white robes. Those were both innovations from the second Klan. So, as I mentioned, 3 Klans, but the one that came to Oregon was the second Klan. I have a copy of an application. When you're dealing with secret societies, it's hard to find stuff about what's going on, because by nature of them. But some of the language is just great. This is an application for the Ladies of the Invisible Empire. So this, as I mentioned, it was a social group, and they encouraged women's groups and kids clubs. And on the application, I guarantee on my honor to conform strictly with all rules and requirements regulating my initiation, my continuance of my membership, and at all times a strict and loyal obedience to your constitutional authority and to the Constitution and laws of the order. If I prove untrue to my obligations, I will willingly accept my portion, whatever penalty your authority may impose. Required sum of $10 must accompany this application as a voluntary contribution. So the membership was the way that they financed the Klan. They had a national organization, and those dues were supposed to go to the national organization. So that became a very lucrative source of income if you were in the hierarchy of the national leadership. As I mentioned before, all the power of the Klan existed in the chapters. So the chapters were independent from the national organization in most ways. They had to pass along the money and the memberships forms, but they really had very little control over the chapters. In Oregon, it turned out that the Portland chapter was the largest. They had up to 10,000 members, it's estimated. And its leader, Frank Gifford, he decided that he was going to declare himself the supreme leader, and there was nobody to go against that. And so he became a power unto himself. He did kind of flame out after a while, though, but the smaller chapters were much more independent, and they survived a lot longer than the Portland group. On the application is this, I mean, they go into great detail. Are you married, single, widowed, divorced? In what church were you married? Do you have children? In what church were you baptized? Again, there was a very moral and religious component to the second clan. The one I like best, can you keep a secret? And the follow-up question, will you do so? Do you owe any allegiance to any foreign nation, government, institution, sect, people, or ruler? Do you esteem the United States of America, its flag and constitution above any other nation, flag, and government? And will you be ever loyal to supporting same? Can you always be depended on? So again, there was this very moralistic and I don't know, what do you call it? Just a very pure, they were into purity. And that's what attracted a lot of good people to the Klan of this time. A lot of good people got involved because they were saying the right things. We're against drinking, we're against a lot of stuff. This is from, this was a paid advertisement that appeared in the Cottage Grove Sentinel in 1922. Here's the truth, the whole truth about the Knights of the Ku Klux Klan. And it's like a quarter sheet of the paper, and it's from the national organization, so they just paid to have it put into the Sentinel. The Ku Klux Klan has many qualities. But like the church, the enemies of the Klan are many and varied. Whiskey peddlers, crooked politicians, and scofflaws of all kinds. And it's necessary to keep regarding the assurances of the Klan. In this, they go to definitely express that they have nothing against the Negro. That up in Oregon, that was a non-issue because the exclusionary laws in the Constitution, as both a territory and as a state, made it not a great destination for people of African descent. So in the original exclusion laws, if you were found, in the territory days, if you were found here, you could be whipped 39 times, and if you were found 6 months later, have that repeated. So they did soften that up, and then by the time of the 1870 18th Amendment, it was null and void, but it took until 1926 to remove it from the Constitution. So in Oregon, blacks were a non-issue. In some of the southern states, that was still a concern, and that was where the individuality of a chapter came into play. So in Oregon, there was no blacks, so that wasn't an issue. There was 8% Catholic, and that's what became the target of the Klan in Oregon, which I will get to. So also in this, it states some things that sound very familiar. They talk about going into schools and libraries where there may be books that go against our country, and those should be removed. And also a very strong case of immigrants of all stripes. And I will be telling you more about how all these issues came to be. Because 1920, the Roaring Twenties, had a lot of things going for it. A lot of things. So I'm going to set the stage to understand why in 1920 or why in 1915 is when it got started, but it didn't really hit Oregon until 1920. Why did we have this reactionary group of people rise from the ashes? Well, just about every aspect of our society was affected. Anybody know what happened in 1920? Yeah, we gave those women the right to vote. What a big mistake, God. Right? Yeah. And then, what else did happen? Exactly why we were scared to give the women the right to vote. They dried up the country. The Volstead Act and the 18th Amendment happened. So we had a double whammy. We had women voting and no drinking. So those were two big things that happened. Also, it was right after World War I. So during World War I, there had been a lot of change happening. Many blacks left the South to take munition jobs or war jobs in the North. And they were like, hey, it's pretty nice up here. I'm not likely to get lynched. In the county I was born in, Madison, it's the 6th highest lynch rate in Florida. I think 17 recorded lynchings between 1870 and 1950. And I had witnessed effectual slavery. My grandmother had a yard man, could not sign his name. He had to make an X. And they literally required a lot of intense labor for the local industry of shade tobacco and turpentine harvesting. So they kept the population suppressed and uneducated, living in shacks with no water. And it was effectual servitude. All right, so from 1870 to 1920, so many things in the United States and the world happened. We have what we call the Second Industrial Revolution. So the Industrial Revolution happened, and then it kind of was on pause for a while, and then everything started happening. You got electrical power, you got water and gas and sewage, and you got rail and telegraph, and suddenly people can move at will very independently. You can move materials around. So we have this second industrial revolution. People started leaving the land. So the agrarian, let me make sure I got that. Yes, so away from the land to the city. So people that had, up until 1870, 75% of the people were living on farms. And that changed rapidly as people left the farms to go to the cities to get jobs. So the people that moved to the cities felt this huge disconnect because they were used to being connected to the land and being self-sufficient. And suddenly they were living in tenements and they were dealing with all kind of overcrowding, unsanitary conditions, horrible work conditions in the factories. There was very little to no safety regulations. So immigration was also a big issue because just like in America, things were changing. Agriculture was changing, and people were suddenly displaced from their way of living, and we had these steam railways to get people to the port, and then you had big ocean liners where you could get a real cheap passage in the third class, get over, come to America, and then get a factory job. It was the dream. And as more and more people arrived, we increased our population by 15% between 1900 and 1910. So immigration started to be a real issue. Native-born Americans were like, hey, wait a minute, who are all these people? And it used to be you got the quality immigrants like the Germans or the Norwegians that came to work timber or something. But now we were getting Southern European, which were predominantly Catholic, Southern Asian, Southern Europe, Eastern Europe, like Poles, Slavs, etc. We got a lot of Jewish people coming over, and people started saying, wait a minute, this is wrong. We're getting these foreigners here. And so it's not so much a melting pot as a dumping ground. And like I said, the same technological forces that were changing our country were also affecting Europe. That we'd been concerned on the West Coast about Asians for a long time, and they had the Asian Exclusion Act and the Gentleman's Agreement. So those were already, regulating immigration was already an issue in many people's psyches. After World War I, after the initial euphoria of, hey, we won, then a lot of other things set in. Again, the northern migration of blacks, often they led to people that haven't lived together before. We had some race riots. We had the post-war recession that largely stemmed from the settlement of the Versailles Treaty. So there was a little bump, and then there was a big, some people classify it as a depression. We had labor unrest. The Triangle Shirtwaist Factory was 1911, I believe. And so people were starting to unionize over safety and working conditions. There were suspicions of these people coming from Europe were communists, and the Red Scare was at this time. So a lot of things going on. Again, I mentioned that after over a 70-year struggle, women had the right to vote. And not only did they have a right to vote, but they started to say, you know what, I don't think I need to wear the corsets and the long dresses and keep my hair as my glory. I'm going to chop my hair, dress comfortably, and go out and have a good time. And so the flappers were born. So all that change was coming down. So as I was looking through you can't do a search for KKK. You can look for Ku Klux Klan and you'll get some limited hits. But if you're looking for KKK, you have to do a visual search. So I was going through a couple of volumes of the 20s looking for stuff. And I noticed an awful lot of stories about moonshining and other alcohol-related. If you'll notice here that not only did they get a farmer for moonshining, they caught him with a still and 4 gallons, but one of those gallons disappeared apparently between here and the courthouse, and so that was a sidebar story. And they were indicating that somebody may be up for libel if they're putting it on there. But Sheriff Pitcher, Green Pitcher, his house is right on Washington. He was a longtime lawman here. There was also a restaurateur, Mrs. Henderson, had the drinks she was serving had a little bit too much kick, they said. But I noticed an awful lot of moonshine. There was also a story about somebody got caught selling bottles of tea, but they used a cork that had been in a moonshine bottle and wedged it in. And so when the people smelled the cork, they thought it was good, and they couldn't get it out till he got away. So he got off, but his customers, if they caught him, might have been bad. All right, show of hands. How many people have watched the 3.5 hours of Birth of a Nation? Have you watched any excerpts of it? All right, it's considered a cinematic masterpiece. There's no question that D.W. Griffith was a master cinematographer. He had many innovations, and I would say he rivals Buster on his camera work, not on his performance, but he was a director only. Anyway, he did this 1915 film. This on the right is, on the left is the advertisement that appeared in the Cottage Grove Sentinel in 1918, Birth of the Nation. Full operatic score and complete symphony orchestra of traveling musicians. This was a big deal. They had a 15-page souvenir booklet that went with it, and it is completely racist. I was appalled. Curiously enough, most of the performers are white actors in blackface, because you really, that doesn't really look that black, you know. But it's the most stereotypical way you can try to portray African Americans, and it was based on a book called The Klansman, and on the other side, this is it came back in 1922. He was outraged. Excuse me. He was outraged that anybody had the audacity to criticize his work for any reason. And so he made a movie in response called Intolerance, because he thought people were being intolerant of his intolerant script. But it's also considered a masterpiece. This, The Birth of a Nation, was a blockbuster. It made buku bucks. And Intolerance, he ran so far over a budget that he basically never recovered. He did make over 500 films in his life, and he formed United Artists strictly because he didn't want to have anybody telling him what to do. He joined up with Mary Pickford, Douglas Fairbanks, and Charlie Chaplin, and they were the United Artists, and I guess they all pooled in some money so that they could make movies the way they want to. So it was 3.5 hours, 12 reels. It was the first film ever screened in the White House. Woodrow Wilson saw it, and we know he's not the most progressive on race relations. It was based on the book called The Klansman, Thomas Dixon Jr. He wrote that, and in that book, he's the one that came up with the burning crosses. And he attributed that to the Scottish clans, that when they needed to assemble the clans, they would burn a cross on the hillside. So he also had the white robes mentioned in there. So that is what sparked the burning crosses. It became so what do you call that? Emblematic of the Klan. This is Mary Pickford and D.W. there. Here's the souvenir booklet. And here is some of the shots from there. You can see, I would say that is a white man, that is a white man, maybe African American, probably a white man. But anyway, you should owe it to yourself to watch it sometime. This man watched it. He got very excited after watching the movie. This is William Joseph Simmons. And he is the one that resurrected the Klan. He was laid up with he was in some kind of automobile accident and recouping, and he got a hold of a couple of old Klansmen from the first Klan and got one of their documents that he used, and he incorporated the ideas out of the Birth of the Nation and what he was able to find historically, and cause the Klan to be born again. So it wasn't really the same Klan. He had a very different view. He was a preacher, he was an orator, he was in all kind of Masonic and fraternal organizations, so he wanted to incorporate that aspect into the organization. The first ceremony they had was on top of Stone Mountain, Georgia. Stone Mountain is this granite, I can't remember the geologic term, but it's where this big, huge pocket of magma rose up and is preserved. It's also home to the Confederate Memorial, the huge carving relief that has Jefferson Davis, Robert E. Lee, Stonewall Jackson, and probably P.T. Beauregard. I don't know who else on there, but I think there's 4 officers, and it's always been, since that initiation, it was on Thanksgiving Day, 1915, on top of the Stone Mountain. And so it's been considered hallowed ground for many, many different groups. You had huge Klan rallies there during the 20s, and to this day, people show up and demonstrate. I also saw a picture with a Black Lives Matter in front of the relief carving. Curiously enough, a good friend of mine, Chris Chandler, was born and raised in Stone Mountain, Georgia, and tells a story how when it was Klan Day and all the people marched through the streets, he was out there, cheering them on too. He goes, what did I know? I'm just some kid. My parents are Southerners. We didn't know. So anyway, it's kind of neat to have that connection. Well, Simmons was a well-meaning man, but he wasn't a very savvy guy. This is Hiram Evans, and even though he helped, as a Klansman in Texas, helped kidnap and torture a black man, again, chapters did what they did. He was a very adept organizer and got involved in the organization and rose rapidly through the ranks, very capable, and he engineered a group, and they cooed out the founder, Simon. So they bounced him out in 22. And even though he had this past of being violent, he realized very young that if we want to get anywhere, we need to be politically savvy. It's our political power that we want to harness, and that's how we can affect change. And so he was always publicly discouraging vigilante actions. Of course, you have very little control over independent chapters, but he was very skilled. They think about anywhere between 3 and 6 million people in the Midwest. A lot of activity in Indiana, Illinois, Colorado, again all the way up into Canada. It was a national organization, and again, those $10 memberships flowed in and kept things going. He had a gathering of 200,000 in 23 and moved the office from Atlanta to Washington in 1924, and they had a huge march down Pennsylvania Avenue. I tried to get a video on so you can see these columns of, they're very organized, carrying American flags, forming a cross, moving, walking in a cross formation. Again, very moral appearances. He was very intent on focusing attention on the immigration, particularly the Southern European. These people were Catholics or trade unionists or Jewish or communists, and they're coming for your jobs and your purity. So that was the message that they used very successfully on a national level. And again, there was this resentment of people that were forced to live in cities, that they had lost their bucolic country life. And then there's all these unwashed foreigners coming in and taking those factory jobs, undercutting my wages. So it was an easy sell. Did you know that the Klan branched into media? So this is the Klan paper for Oregon, the Western American, and they were published in Astoria. The U of O has about 2 years worth of their papers, and if you look through some of the headlines, they're pretty lurid. Klan member a hero, and different stuff. So if you've never gone to the U of O historic newspaper file, then I recommend you do, and look up. You can look by newspaper and select a Western American. You also can do a word search for any of the papers. So some rich diggings going there. They also had movie companies and cinemas. This was a Klan movie, The Face at Your Window. This was in Eugene. And I found the accompanying stories that went with this movie. This was the ad for it. So this was talking about the Klan picture was to be had, and they burned a cross on the butte nearby. I guess that's the one, it's not Skinner Butte, I don't think, but the one right in town. And they also had a couple of guys on horseback in hoods, and they were really just there as props. They weren't taking over the city or anything like that. But so that was there, and you're probably wondering when would I get to the Grove? So here we are. I had to set the stage, tell you about what's going on nationally. But Cottage Grove. So the first mention I found in Cottage Grove was the May 26, 1922. They talked about many voters carried the ticket to the polls. The Ku Klux Klan ticket, which was scattered over the county on little orange pieces of paper, had considerable influence on the results in the county as well as over the state. Many voters carried this ticket to the polls and voted in straight. So there's a big discussion, was there a slate or not? Was there a ticket or not? Tickets have been in Cottage Grove history forever. In 1905, there were 3 tickets: the law and order ticket, the businessman ticket, and the taxpayer's ticket. And so they would put somebody up for every position and then run as a block and hopefully get enough of their people in to make a difference. So the Klan realized early on that our path to power is through the voting box. So the current governor, Ben Olcott, he condemned the Klan but ignored the power of the anti-immigrant message, and his opponent was more politically savvy. Oregon was considered a Republican state at this time, and when you talk about Republican Democrat, you can't equate that to today's terms. Southerners tended to be Democrats, Northerners tended to be Republicans, and the parties were unrecognizable by today's terms or labels. So the incumbent governor, Ben Olcott, he condemned the Klan, but he didn't have his ear to the ground. So here's that. What I told you, I saw that this was the second mention, was a paid ad from the national office. Let me see if I can find that about the library. In our schools and libraries are books that are filled with schools or libraries are books that are filled with that vilified American citizens, books that instate hatred and dislike among the people of different sections of America. The Klan is pledged to true history. So great is the power of these books for evil that the Klan takes one of them from our schools. It is considered the friendship of every patriotic American. So it's funny how some themes come up year after year. It also was very strong against immigrants in this piece. So Governor Olcott, he, like I said, he was concerned about the Klan, but he put too much faith in the good nature of Oregonians. He thought that it would blow over, it wasn't serious, that people would have better sense. But he did remove when it was discovered that one of the members of his board was a Klansman, he removed him, and I'm sure didn't endure him to other Klan members. But working up to the election, the governor's election of 22, there was 4 candidates vying for the Republican nomination, and Olcott included. Only one of the candidates espoused an anti-immigrant view, and that was a man named Hall. And he got into it and decided to try and get the nomination. The Democrat, Walter Pierce, he already had seized on that. So Hall decided, okay, well, if he's going to run, I guess I will bow out, because he didn't really have support of his Republicans in any case. So Olcott went up against Pierce. A little out of sequence here. This is the Mount David oil derrick, where a lot of local money went down the hole. But the Klan went up on the derrick and put up a huge cross, and instead of lighting it on fire, they electrified it. And here is we were fortunate in the library, even though the negative is damaged, this is the electric cross that was on the oil derrick, and this is damage to the negative, but if you can see up close, you can see the members of the derrick, like right in here. And here's the story that goes with it. They had planned a big march through town. All of a sudden, cars just started showing up. It wasn't announced. They had strung electric wires up from the city to Mount David. They had the cross, and all these cars were showing up, and they were having a big initiation meeting up on plan for Mount David. There was this old man, 87 years old. He couldn't make it up the hill, so they drove him up using the service road to get to the derrick. And he got so worked up that he had a heart attack and died. And they whisked him away, took him back to town, and then everybody left. And so the plan marched through town, and the big initiation all fell apart, but it was front page news in the Sentinel. KKK demonstration halted by death of participant. Meeting complete surprise. So yeah, all of a sudden cars just started showing up from everywhere, every direction, and that's the way it is with a secret society. The Klan also tried to show its good side. They were generous. Here they are giving $100 to this. This is a poor farm. The WCTU farmhouse is a poor farm. And so they were going to canvass and collect money. They were trying to raise $40,000, and the Klan stepped up and gave them $100. And here's the organization for a women's Klan group. As I mentioned, they had kids groups as well, and tried to exhibit as much wholesomeness as possible. All right, so here I said I got them out of sequence. I was editing right up to the last second. Olcott really didn't pick up on the amount of anger and frustration that was built up over immigration. So he called out the Klan and denounced them and said that this. You got to have good sense prevail, and what they missed is that since there were no African Americans in Oregon, the only real target you could focus on was the Catholics. Catholics were about less than 8% and insisted on having parochial schools. So this was an easy target. So also on the 1922 ballot was the compulsory school bill that said you must attend public school. So here was some of the reasons why they thought the Catholics couldn't run a school. One was they didn't do Bible teaching the way it should be done. So, and that was more of a Baptist model where you thump the Bible, you give it a good solid reading as written, you don't vary from the text, and give it to them straight. They were also lax on teaching citizenship in the view of the opponents to the Catholic schools. And they thought they were purposely teaching bad on purpose, so to keep people uneducated and more manageable. At this time, Oregon had an extremely high literacy rate, so that's why Olcott thought that people would be smarter than to fall for something like that. But the compulsory school law was on the ballot. This is Walter Pierce. He was a very mixed bag. He was into eugenics. He was very much in support of prohibition. But he was also a populist in the fact that he thought corporations and big business didn't pay their fair share. He was a big supporter of the Compulsory School Act, and he accepted Klan's endorsements tacitly. There's never been any proof that he was a member. A lot of people call him a Klan governor, but I think he used the Klan. He kind of played him along and said, yeah, I'm all for that, I'm for this, yep, right. And as soon as he got elected, he dropped him like a hot potato. In fact, Gifford, the head of the Portland chapter, tried to get him to do some things. He wanted to sit down and get appointments. He wanted jobs in his administration, and he blew him off. They demanded that they wanted the state asylum director to be their pick, and he wouldn't do it. And so the Klan actually launched an unsuccessful recall against him. He did have a lot of progressive ideas, like taxing the corporations. He was into hydroelectric power and other reforms. He divided the Dems because he supported one La Follette and over other people. He was elected in the Roosevelt landslide, and he was a very strong supporter of the New Deal later in his career. So here's the election results. Pierce elected governor, and the compulsory school law carried. The law would linger in the courts for quite some time. It went all the way to the Supreme Court and then was declared unconstitutional. Here is their threat. This is the headlines. They were threatening. The Klan was threatening, if you don't put our guy in, it's going to be trouble. And he stood him down, and they weren't able to get him. They kind of shot their wad after a while. Cottage Grove hosted the Butchers and Grocers in 1922, and as guest speaker, we had Walter Pierce came. Here he's talking about 1/2 of the wealth of the state is carrying no part of the great burden of taxation, said Mr. Pierce. Tangible property, farms, and homes are paying 96% of taxes, while intangible property, bonds, and stocks put away in banks bear but 4% of the burden. So he had that kind of dialed in. The only way to keep our property from communism is to save ourselves from the same condition as now prevail in Russia, is to solve this problem. Immigration from both Europe and Asia was deplored by Mr. Pierce, who favors closing the doors of America to the great influx of immigration from both Europe and Asia that would come in and swallow up the American born. Especially did he deplore Mongolian immigration because of the lowering effect it has on the standard of living of America. Well, that is one good thing they gave us. So anyway, he came out. I looked up. It was a park. I don't know, but it was. They had the whole town was organized to provide the place for the butchers, and they had all kind of contests. The ugliest grocer, the fattest grocer. They had all kind of foot races. They had baseball games. They had all sorts of things. And people came. They organized the Ford dealer had a ferry to get people out there from the train station. It was the Bartell Hotel was involved in the catering, I think, and they had all these barbecue pits. And it was announced that there was no shady concessions. So what happened to the Klan in Oregon? Well, what happened to the Klan in the United States, the second Klan? There was a lot of infighting among the organization, a lot of people trying to profit or try to gain power. When Evans took it away from Simons, Simons went out and had his own organization, and they had rival clans, and they were each competing for support. And some people would show allegiance to Simons and others to Evans, so they were always after the same dollar, though. But Evans, in fact, paid Simons, I think, the equivalent of $175,000, or maybe it was $175,000, if he would cease and desist. Simons tried to form a women's organization before Evans did, and so Evans sued him and won the suit. I mean, this is what brought the organization down. Also, as I said, many people were drawn to the virtues that were advertised. If you read, like I said, this advertisement, it talks all about what good things they do. And as it went on, they kind of learned, well, our leaders aren't doing those good things. So people that had good intentions or good morals kind of drifted away from the groups. There was a particularly egregious scandal from the person in Indiana where he actually sexually assaulted and murdered a woman, and before he thought she was dead, but she revived long enough to give him a conviction on him what he did, and that almost destroyed the Klan in Indiana. They lost 95% of their interest. So squabbling, corruption, and moral failure drove many people away from this, what they'd been attracted to as a force for social change, a way to confront all of this unsettling stuff, the changing mores and habits, the increased population, the people moving to cities and having to live in cities, the recession following the war, the trade union battles for living wage, and there was many issues that were happening, and the Klan seemed to provide an answer. Well, the answer did not deliver. So there were a few more slides that I didn't get quite into the program, and one that I really regret. I wanted to thank the Lane County Historical Museum. They sent me the only known picture that we know of a group in Lane County, and it didn't identify exactly where, but I will post that to the updated show. So there's one picture of a Klan gathering, it's labeled as being in Lane County. By the last reference I saw was in the 30s. So by the 1930s, the Klan in Oregon had pretty well dissipated. Some of the smaller chapters kept going for a while, but they were very small and mostly had gone out of business. There was the chapter in LeGrand. Somebody took the records and gave it to a lawyer who was a member of the Klan, and that he put it in a vault and left it, and when he died they found it, and that's one of the few records we have of actual proceedings of a chapter. And in that they had a visit from Governor Pierce, who at that time was, I think their chapter went out in 26, so he was still governor. And they go, our last meeting is going down in history as the greatest ever, because we had the governor here. And they did call him a Klansman, but I think it was just by accolation rather than joining physically. So, any questions?
About the Gompa.
Oh, yes. The Gompa. I didn't get that in either. So the Gompa was attacked in 1981. They had created this red Tara deity image, and they were having the dedication of it, and they were disturbed by a very loud crash on the window. And they went out, and they saw a 6-foot flaming cross in the yard. And it was like very unnerving. And first, to be in deep meditation and then have a big crash on your window, it did not break the window. The rock bounced off, apparently. But they had this cross to deal with, so they extinguished it and said it was, in the newspaper article, it said it was very well built. But the Rinpoche, he just says, well, I just think it's some kids messing around. He wasn't too concerned about it at all. And it probably just was. In my neighborhood, where I grew up, in the later times, it was, again, we lived in a segregated town, but as time went on, it was no longer segregated. Civil rights arrived, and the corner house used to be the Florida State University football coach's house, Pete Peterson. Well, at some point, Rudy, I can't think of his last name, but he was the coach at the historically black college, Florida A&M. He was the football coach there, and he bought that house and moved in. And on his fence, somebody sprayed KKK, because that was, I think, our first black family in that neighborhood. And it turned out to be the kid of the developers that developed that subdivision. And so it was that kind of stuff all happened all the time. We went to a football game. I was in the band. We would play the halftime, do the marching routine, and then during the game we would play the little pep numbers and stuff. And these kids from the Crosstown High School, our rival from Leon, we were playing in the Florida A&M Stadium and against the experimental school, the university school where they train teachers. So we were playing the FAMU junior high or high school. And these guys have nothing better to do. These Leon degenerates show up and whip out a 3x5 Confederate battle flag in this all-black stadium. So the game just stopped because people just flowed over, because that's like, if you wanted to get in a fight, that was a great way to do it. Another good way was to say the N-word. If you called somebody an N-word, you were in a fight if you were black and white. So that was unacceptable. And so anyway, people were just streaming across, and they wanted the flag, and they tried to run with it, and they got their butts kicked, and I was like, good on them, you know. That was this really stupid thing. And why did they pick our game? Why didn't they do that when their game? So yeah, I experienced a lot of overt and racism. I had a black friend, and I saw people write "in lover" by my picture in the annual. You know, there was a lot of stuff that I'd rather forget. But anyway, it did my heart good to do some research, and I'll clean up the presentation and get a few more things. There was a mention of a meeting that was also held in the Odd Fellows, where they had a women's group and a group of kids doing a flag drill. And so they also had training and educate classes. So it was a mixed bag in Oregon. There was, again, primarily anti-Catholic, and they had their heyday up until about 24, and then it was a pretty much slow decline after that. Yes?
On that movie, you saw the movie brochure. Did you actually saw the real movie brochure for the Birth of a Nation?
I found it online. There was like archives that showed it, but it had. I saw one where you could look through it, and it had all the list of people that were in it and stills and things like that.
What is that?
It's a study center where it's on River Road. It's called the River House, and has the peace flags out. It's gray and kind of a redwoodish red. And they've had prayer there for ongoing since 40 years, I would say, at least. Yeah, the Chagdud Rinpoche came on his journey from Tibet and stayed here for a number of years. And we actually have two different Buddhist groups in Cottage Grove. There's another one in the Northwest neighborhood as well. So they're both open for coming in and learning more. Oh, the flyer. So if there's no further questions, even though this chapter of the clan is past, we're still dealing with the rest, the residue. This was brought to me yesterday, found in Coiner Park, and it's in the Jewish Beast, Save Now, the Pacific Northwest Youth, Save the White Race.
Yesterday in Coiner Park.
So it's still with us, the same old feelings still with us. World goes round.
That's a current thing found yesterday in Coiner Park.
Yeah, somebody brought it to me and gave it to me. Said, "Yeah, I think this might." It was torn up, so somebody found it and didn't like it, tore it up, but the pieces were there. So I would love if it would all be in the rear view, but I guess we still have a little more work to do.